Welcome to Offshore Renewables Unplugged, our podcast here from DMEC, where we try to really unravel a topic around the offshore renewable energy industry in a short form, really trying to give you a quick overview of everything that is important about that topic. And that topic for today is offshore hydrogen. Two words that maybe not a lot of people have heard together before, but this is why we're here. This is what we're trying to talk about. So, first of all, hydrogen is something that has been discussed in the offshore or in the renewable energy industry a lot in the past years. It's been heard a lot in terms of mobility, but also a lot of other aspects. We're trying to shed a bit of light on that. And I'm very happy to be joined here today by Benjamin, who's going to help us through the topic a little bit. Benjamin had the chance to host or to chair a session at the Hydrogen Technology Expo in Hamburg in October, where we invited a lot of speakers to discuss the topic of how can hydrogen really play a role in this renewable energy system. But first of all, I would like to just start with a simple question, and that is simply, what is hydrogen? Why are we even talking about it in an energy context?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And it's always dangerous because we are coming here together as two more or less experts on the renewable energy world and talking about hydrogen. So as electricity people, we suddenly talk about molecules. So I hope everybody will stay with us from that perspective. But to start really at the basics, as you asked, what is hydrogen? Hydrogen is a molecule, very simple molecule, two H8 atoms. One of the, or actually the lightest molecule, which makes it also quite problematic in certain functions. And a very interesting molecule as it is needed in a lot of different processes already. So there is a lot of hydrogen already in our ecosystem, in our environment, in our industry. And yeah, so I don't think, should I go into chemistry? No, I don't think so.
No, but I think maybe something that is good to very quickly unravel is maybe the hydrogen rainbow, the range of colors of hydrogen that people might
Yeah,
encounter.
yeah.
I think it's worth to mention that very quickly.
No, for sure. And with a chemical background, I always find it so funny if people talk about green, purple, gray, blue hydrogen because it's a colorless gas. So, which has a spectrum, of course, but that has nothing to do with one industry is talking about it. So, yeah, let's unravel a bit. Which color you like?
My favorite color? Well, I mean, I think job related, I have the choice between orange and blue. No, I think it would probably be blue hydrogen. Well, not per se blue hydrogen, but blue.
Blue. Let's start
Let's
blue.
have
Or let's start gray to come to blue because that's a bit easier, I think, for our listeners. But gray hydrogen is the hydrogen we're using day in, day out for many processes. It just means it is gray because it's produced out of fossil fuels, right? So we have methane as natural gas, and we can basically produce hydrogen out of it. Why would you do that? Because there are a lot of industries that need hydrogen. And that's also all the hydrogen we are currently producing, or almost all. There's a bit of other hydrogen types already in there, is gray. You said blue, I said gray. This is because blue hydrogen is the same as gray, but then instead of just letting the CO2 go and help the Earth get a bit warmer, in blue hydrogen we capture the CO2 and avoid the climate or greenhouse gas effect of CO2 a bit more. So there are certain countries pushing for blue, like Norway, also in Germany a bit. But it's primarily also the US, which pushed a lot for blue hydrogen, or pushed. Nobody knows what the US is doing in the year 2025, but pushed for blue hydrogen there. And yeah,
So basically, just to summarize on that side, blue hydrogen is actually a process to produce hydrogen, which is very well known, which is established already. But we introduced a new technology, which is carbon capture and storage, or maybe
exactly.
utilization and storage, which is a different topic. We won't go
Yeah.
too much into depth on that one right now. But it's actually CCS that we're talking about.
And the benefit there is, I mean, of course, you add something so it becomes more expensive. but at the same time, you don't have to bother with greenhouse gas emissions and associated costs. So like the carbon pricing system, the ETS system in Europe, for example, is then less of a problem. But you also cannot tap into the subsidies which are there for really renewable hydrogen.
Yeah. Are we going to make our way completely through the rainbow now, or just going to take a jump to green from here?
Yeah, I love rainbows. So we have white hydrogen, which is hydrogen mined. We have like mined from the earth, basically. We have pink hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced from nuclear power. We have turquoise hydrogen, which is a certain special kind of blue hydrogen. We have there's definitely more. We have a full rainbow, but there is a lot of these different types of associated hydrogen types. And but yeah, let's jump to green because I think that's the most interesting one, and that's the one we are here for.
And I guess the first job we're doing there is one that you already did by introducing I think pink was the one from nuclear power, right?
Yeah.
First we talk about hydrocarbons, about fossil fuels that we turn into hydrogen. Now we talk about electricity. Just maybe very quickly,
Yeah,
what's the
good one. Yeah.
what's the process there? How are we making that jump?
So both green and pink hydrogen are the ones which are actually produced via electricity. And basically what you do, you have an electrolysis process which basically splits up water molecules, so H2O, into water and oxygen. Into hydrogen and oxygen. So you have these two products there, and the hydrogen is of course the one which we are interested in for industrial processes. In the pink hydrogen, you use nuclear power for it, very consistent, maybe a bit expensive, and needs a fuel. And on the green hydrogen, you use renewable electricity for it, so wind, solar, also hydropower, and new types of technology like wave tidal, etc., would also fall under green hydrogen. And then again, electrolysis, and you end up with hydrogen there.
Okay, so basically we've established there is a way to turn electricity into hydrogen,
Yeah.
which is good because electricity is probably something that will be dominating our energy system in the longer run. But already, what is right now maybe some of the use cases for hydrogen? Because it's not only something of the future; it's also something of the present, as we've already seen with the grey hydrogen. I think there's roughly like a global demand of 100 million tons of hydrogen per year right now. But all of these are existing markets. So maybe we can just very quickly go over what are the key industries that use hydrogen, that require hydrogen right now, and use primarily the grey hydrogen.
Definitely. So you already mentioned this 100 million ton figure. Of that, the majority, I think around 40-ish%, is used for actually hydrocarbons. So for our refineries, oil, gas, primarily oil refineries actually are in need of hydrogen to produce more complex molecules like kerosene, but also like benzene or diesel. You need hydrogen for these processes already. So that's the biggest market and one of the first markets, one of the first markets which established itself. Another big one is actually has its origin in Germany, where you're from, and that is the ammonia synthesis. So the Haber-Bosch.
Haber-Bosch?
Yeah, exactly.
Somewhere deep in the chemistry high school knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, and that process basically enabled us to feed way more people than ever before. So from that perspective, ammonia was a key ingredient to reduce world hunger. Before that, we used it, so ammonia mainly is used as fertilizer, or as a very important part of fertilizer, next to phosphorus and other ingredients. And before that, we just used to scrap off bat poop in South America and use that as fertilizers and other things, but that was not really on a large scale feasible. And with ammonia, we could do that. And for that, that's about 30-ish% of our global hydrogen demand is on that. And yeah, so ammonia also is an in-between molecule for other things. We will come to that, I think, a little bit later, but shipping can use ammonia, and we have also some other molecule synthesis processes where hydrogen plays a role. Methanol, for example, or hybridization of certain molecules. So there's a lot of these processes, and these other processes make up the last 20-30% then of the global hydrogen demand.
Yeah. But then I guess, especially when we talk about increasing the global production of hydrogen, we'll go into why that is actually demanded or why that is suggested by a lot of industry players. But before we really go into that, that already implies that there will be a growth in the hydrogen market because there's a supply right now, which is, I think it's fair to say that hydrogen is not per se a commodity because it's really more of a direct supplier relationship where quite often we're more talking about closed door deals, sometimes on-site production of hydrogen. But there's a market shift that is probably needed if we want to have this sector integration where hydrogen plays an important role next to electricity as well. So if we want to have this market growth, we need new technologies that actually use hydrogen, that help us to replace fossil fuels maybe in other applications. So yeah, what are some of those examples? Where could we see an increase in hydrogen demand in the future?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. The hydrogen world has promised demand growth, like exuberant demand growth, several times in history, right? First around, or actually the first one was around Second World War, where synthetic fuels were needed when there was no oil and gas anymore for the Axis powers. There was, after the oil crisis, there was again a huge push for hydrogen. And there was always this feeling of demand will go really, really crazy. And we have seen the same in the 2020s, where we also felt like demand will go crazy because of the energy transition. It's a very important molecule for the energy transition. And I think your question is also a bit, why is it an important molecule for the energy
Exactly. Yeah.
transition?
Yeah. Like what is it going to help us
Yeah.
achieve basically? Yeah.
So there are a few sectors where it's just really difficult to directly electrify them. We have some of the mobility sectors, which are really about moving very large weights over very long distances, be it long haul shipping, be it flying, be it even long haul trucks to a certain degree, where it's still very uncertain if we can cover any of those with just direct electrification. I think in the hydrogen offshore hydrogen video we had this example of 5 to 10,000 times the amount of batteries of electrical car to make one transatlantic flight. Of course, the plane would be so heavy that it would need even more, and that's a bit of a problematic aspect. So this is the one aspect.
Or like we get to go with even smaller hand luggage to
Yeah,
limit ourselves to a toothbrush.
exactly. Everything else you need to buy in the country, local content, right? Everything else you need to buy in the country where you go to.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess if you make it across the Atlantic, the local content right now plays a very important role.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
might be
definitely.
might be a good incentive. But anyway, no, but yeah, you have a good point. I guess there's extreme examples where there's two ends of the spectrum. I think for a lot of individual mobility right now, we see that there was a bit of a push for hydrogen in the early 2000s, and there was a bit of a head-to-head race with batteries. Now batteries have definitely outrun, so to say, the hydrogen mobility. But there's the other side of the spectrum where it's really long distances, where there is probably something more energy dense needed than batteries. And also, yeah, there's a gray space in the middle, so to say. There's something in between where the question maybe is still open a bit.
Yeah, definitely. One really good example here is trucks in China at the western part of China. Like there is, and maybe even personal mobility there to a certain degree, because China is really building out the hydrogen infrastructure there, because they need it for the trucks anyhow. The cost of making it electrical there is too high, even though they produce batteries super cheap. So there is a bit of a gray space in between. But I think what we're seeing in Europe is that really electric vehicles have outcompeted hydrogen vehicles massively. So maybe some trucks will be still hydrogen. There are still discussions, and on the floor, you mentioned the Hydrogen Expo in Hamburg. On the floor, there's still a lot of talk about individual mobility with hydrogen, but I think I'm very much aligned with you that I think batteries have won that race.
Yeah, I think especially it's a moving target right now. Prices are dropping massively. Of course, there's other dimensions to consider, especially when it comes to supply chains. If there could be more tension also in the battery supply chain, given that there's not a lot of European content right now for a self-sustaining supply chain. But again, I guess that's a different topic. But yeah,
Maybe to add quickly there, though, there's two things to maybe clarify also for our listeners here. And still, if we talk about aviation and about shipping, we don't talk directly about hydrogen ships and hydrogen planes, right? We are talking as hydrogen is needed to produce synthetic or sustainable aviation fuels or SAFs. Yeah, hydrogen is needed to produce methanol for ships, and if the scale of ships we need with sustainable shipping, we need increases than ammonia because methanol cannot cover that scale because the CO2 is needed too much. So there are different fuel components. And talk about synthetic fuels, I think something which might also just stay, but this is a luxury product, is there will be some people who are crazy and willingly enough to buy their Porsche with a synthetic fuel because then it makes the sound of a Porsche.
I guess yeah, we see the same with
Yeah.
mobility already. I guess yeah, you can make that point. There's always people who like the nostalgia of something that makes it sound. But maybe from that, I think just to quickly summarize the technologies that we have already talked about, because I like technologies. We've talked so far about capturing carbon to make hydrogen more sustainable. So about CCUS, we've talked about electrolyzer technologies, and we've talked about synthetic fuel plants. So those are just three of those examples, and I guess two of those really interesting for the real renewable sector, I would say, because there's a lot of discussions around blue hydrogen, and of course it is not renewable in the way that it is not an infinite resource.
And also you have methane leaks when you get like the natural gas out of the ground, so there are issues there as well, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's sustainability, as in green issues, but also issues about the longevity, so to say, of that solution. But I think if we round it up there a little bit about the technologies and talk a bit more about more reasons actually to even discuss hydrogen. If it requires all of these innovations, why is it even something that we are considering? Like, what makes hydrogen as an energy carrier more attractive than electricity, for example, right now?
I mean, for the to stick with the mobility example, still for a while before we go in other sectors. For flights, the only option we have is kerosene or biofuels with their full own set of problems because of land use, because of even like this the cooking fats which we could use for flights. If we utilize all the cooking fat in the world, because that is like one of the consideration, the HFACs, I think is the term there. We would cover the flights internally in Europe. So if we do that over the entire world, so even if we use that, we cannot cover all the flights we are having. So, and flying is 3 to 4% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So therefore, we need another solution. And if we don't want to just produce corn or other crops just to produce biofuel, while some people go hungry because the food prices will go up, then we need another solution, and there hydrogen is a solution. And then we have complete different sectors. So this was mobility, but we have also, for example, the entire industrial sector, steel production, and some of the synthetic fuels we already mentioned. And for those, there's just not a sustainable other way of, I mean, steel right now is just done whether with charcoal or with direct reduction through methane. There is no electricity process in a high technological readiness level, so ready for deployment, besides using hydrogen to basically produce this green steel. So that's another example where we just need the hydrogen. And steel is about 8 to 10% of our global emissions. So then ammonia the same. We only have now the gray hydrogen to produce ammonia, but we need the ammonia to feed our world population. So there's just no real alternative for that. And if you sum all of those up, you end up by 20-30% of our entire greenhouse gas emissions, which need new solutions. And a big part of this new solution might be hydrogen.
Yeah, now that's a really fair point. So to basically summarize there, in terms of the use cases of hydrogen, we have existing sectors, especially the chemical industry when it comes to processing of certain chemicals, when it comes to fertilizer production. But we also have basically emerging sectors which will help us decarbonize the last bit, really, like to really decarbonize some of those sectors, which are often referred to as hard to abate, those sectors where the energy density really plays a role. And then we don't always talk about hydrogen directly as a fuel or as an energy source, but rather hydrogen as one of the process chemicals to make fuels or to actually help fuel those technologies.
Exactly.
Okay, well then basically to summarize, we talked about a number of technologies now. We talked about especially electrolyzer technologies, and we talked about synthetic fuel plants. So all of this requires innovation. All of this are new technologies or new-ish technologies in the way that there is still a lot of cost reduction to be done as well. I guess the price question is also something quite relevant. But let's maybe go to the next question, which is a little bit, why are we making all of this innovation effort? Like, what is it really that right now makes hydrogen such an interesting energy carrier in the energy transition overall?
I mean, it is. We are seeing to one degree we are seeing that we cannot transport all the electricity we're producing in some countries like Netherlands, Germany, Denmark. But at the same time, we cannot decarbonize some of the sectors because we don't have the in-between piece, and hydrogen is this in-between piece for some of those. We also see it as a geopolitical choice because with more geopolitical uncertainty in terms of Germany's loss of Russian gas, higher energy prices, hydrogen can be a solution. We also see the problem of intermittency of different renewables and long duration storage. And long duration, really seasonal storage or strategic seasonal storage, which a bit ties into the strategic question as well. So there as well, there is this strategic thinking. So all in all, I think there are limitations to the rollout of renewables because of demand or demand supply matching, where hydrogen could play a role. We see it. We need to up our game on greenhouse gas or global emissions. The European Union is also a front runner there with the so-called RFNBOs, so the renewable fuels of non-biological origin, which hydrogen falls under, where they subsidize demand creation. And we also see just a geopolitical choice there as being energy secure, independent. Europe doesn't have that much oil and gas. Hydrogen makes a very critical or can play a critical role there. And that's the reasons why we push for these innovations. And front runner, as with many of these renewable innovations, again, is China, which already now has, I think, more capacity installed than the rest for green hydrogen than the rest of the world together. Can produce more electrolyzers than most of actually the entire world together by themselves. So we see this also a very strategic decision for not just Europe but also, for example, China.
Yeah, fair enough. I think the strategic part is definitely also interesting from a policy perspective. Really, how to position Europe and how to ensure that Europe is kind of future proof in that way. But much more concretely, and actually very relevant right now, I think, is also the first point that you mentioned when it comes to something that is often referred to as cannibalization, which means we have so much renewable on the grid right now that there are a lot of moments where there is a lot of renewable production. So this renewable production means that there is sometimes more production than demand, sometimes more production than there is transmission capacity at certain bottlenecks. So I guess that also plays a really important role also for project developers, but also as from a societal perspective, we want to use all of the green energy we're producing because we're paying a lot of money for it. Yeah, what is
It's cheap. Green energy is cheap.
that is true. That is true. It is cheaply produced.
Yeah.
Building projects costs money.
Yeah, exactly.
And revenues play an important role. So maybe you can, quickly,
Yeah,
talk a bit about that aspect.
I think you mentioned a really critical part here because the uncertainty of the demand of the future and the selling price of electricity is really one of the core pieces which holds, we work in offshore energies, which holds offshore wind back, right? So the uncertainty there in relation to what will be the revenues in the future, because can we actually sell all the electricity, or do we just need to stop the turbines because there's too much electricity on the grid or so? And their hydrogen can be a very interesting one. Either hydrogen produced directly in the port, so you get your offshore energy assets, transmit electricity to the port, to the shore, and then basically producing green hydrogen from that, because the port already has all this infrastructure. I mean, for hydrogen, for electrolyzers, we didn't go into detail there, but you need ultra pure water for a good process right now. You need quite a lot of electricity, which can come from the wind turbines or also from solar if there is a lot of solar on the grid where it's connected to. It has a lot of freshwater access because many of the big ports like Port of Antwerp or Port of Rotterdam, they have quite big refineries. And these refineries first they use hydrogen, but also afterwards they can actually become a producer of hydrogen because they already have this freshwater access in ultra pure water. They have the electricity connections, they have the infrastructures, they know how to handle gas, they have storage facilities. So there's a very logical transition there to create this demand on the port side and produce hydrogen and then utilize this hydrogen for other processes.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's a really really important point, because basically next to the fact that we started with on where is hydrogen already used and how can we decarbonize those sectors, and where can hydrogen help in new technologies to decarbonize other sectors, it's also hydrogen can play a really important role when it comes to ensuring the long-term viability of renewable energy projects by basically creating a demand at times where the grid overall either creating a local demand where there's not enough grid capacity to transport electricity, or also to stabilize prices a little bit to reduce some of that volatility by bringing basically a big energy consumer onto the grid that helps to stabilize renewable prices in that way. So I guess all of those are good arguments on why we need to look at green hydrogen in general. But now we as DMEC are focusing on offshore. So what is the story for offshore hydrogen? Why does it make sense to take a technology and move it offshore, a place that is notoriously known for not the easiest engineering in the world, not the cheapest solutions
That's
as
why I
well?
like it. It's difficult.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it shouldn't be too easy.
I would say it's a crazy idea. Let's go to the next idea.
Yeah. We can put it into space, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's where hydrogen also became really big as well for rocket fuel.
Let's not diverge into space. I know it's a passion
I love
topic.
the topic. I love the topic. I'm sorry. Yeah. Why putting it offshore? It is a crazy idea, and I'm not yet sure 100% what I think about it. The main reason is really if you, like with all the challenges we talked about, there's one additional challenge for our offshore wind sector, which is that we go ever further offshore. So we go ever further out there because the close to shore parks are already built, especially in the North Sea. And there's also then, if the turbines become ever bigger, people don't want to look too close to shore at this big turbine. So we're pushing offshore wind further offshore. And if you hit a certain distance between your offshore assets and land, say 200, 300, 400 kilometers, and you still want to build a lot of this offshore wind parks there. Then the question is, and there have been several studies from Fraunhofer, TNO, eBridge Consulting, they showed that it could be more cost competitive if you have partially a cable, electrification cable, and partially you're having a pipeline for hydrogen, which saves several cables then.
Yeah. So I guess that comes down to the fact that on the one hand, a pipeline at a certain scale could be cheaper than a cable.
Yeah.
Kind of like has a higher energy density. We'll come back to that point again. But also that you can continuously produce hydrogen because you don't have a volatile market where in 15-minute intervals your prices change and you might have negative prices, but instead you're producing something you can just sell off at bulk afterwards, right? So you can
Yeah.
produce hydrogen at low price periods, whereas you wouldn't produce electricity.
But yeah, I think there's also still a bit, yeah, definitely. There's also a bit of an issue there because the intermittency of your wind will also impact your electrolysis system. So your green hydrogen, there are different types of electrolyzers. Some are scope better with low or with high intermittency than others. So therefore, this mixed connection where you also feed in electricity when solar is really high on land, you feed in electricity back from shore to your offshore assets. That helps a bit as well. But I think you really pointed out the core of it, which is like getting the volatility out of the business case, having something much more plannable with a bit of electricity sold or a part of electricity sold and a part of it hydrogen being sold then with offtake agreements of hydrogen, which can then be again subsidized via European mechanisms like the RFNBOs.
Yeah. And if we talk about those offshore use cases, is that something that's completely new? Are there already considerations to do something like that? What does the landscape look right now?
Yeah, no, it's a moving target and an interesting landscape. So I think the talk about offshore hydrogen really kicked off when the hydrogen hype was at its highest in recent years. That was 2020. And yeah, so back then, offshore hydrogen projects and also governments in the Netherlands, also Germany started really talking quite actively about it, also Norway. We see now that the hydrogen hype has a bit calmed down. There are still projects in the pipeline on hydrogen, definitely, but on offshore hydrogen, it has become a bit calmer. In the Netherlands, for example, the Demo 1 and Demo 2 projects have been put on pause for 5 years because the
initiatives from the Dutch government to build first demonstrator for hydrogen.
exactly, yeah. We have a very small one, a 0.5 megawatt one now out there, about 0.5 megawatt. The POSHYDON one that is already installed. That's just, I think, 10 kilometers of our office, maybe 15 kilometers of our office. But the Demo 1 was then to upscale that to around 50 megawatts, so 100 time upscaling, and the Demo 2 then 500 megawatts, so another 10 times upscaling, even though the numbers shifted around a few times. But the Dutch government decided to put them on hold because the hydrogen uptake and or the hydrogen offtake of agreements to sell the hydrogen also didn't come along, and the technology development was not as quick as hoped for.
And I think this is actually a really good point what you mentioned there, which is maybe also something to quickly touch upon, which is kind of like maybe a catch-22 or a chicken and egg problem, which is the fact that, of course, the production of hydrogen from renewable sources is more expensive than the blue hydrogen or than gray hydrogen for sure. So you have to create an offtake market for this green hydrogen. You really have to have that market already. And in order to actually bring this revenue security that you talked about, kind of like reducing some of the volatility in the business cases, reducing some of the merchant risk of the project developers on the electricity market. For that, actually, we need a market. So, what do you think? Which one will move first? Actually, will it be the green hydrogen that first starts expanding, or is it first the off takers, which either go for more green hydrogen or new technologies that will be increasing there?
Yeah, great question. Crystal ball time, I guess. But
Well, yeah, let's go for it.
I think they are moving in conjunction, and that's also what we are seeing. So 2020, 2021, hydrogen hype, everybody jumping into it. First electrolyzer plants and like the production of electrolyzers, like the entire supply chain is being built up. But then 2023, 2020 or 2024-ish, we're seeing, wait, but we can produce all these electrolyzers, but we don't have offtake agreements. And now 2024, 2025, we really see an upscaling in offtake agreements. Some of them successful, some of them not successful, because then also for some, they realize, we sign an agreement to buy for this and this price, but it cannot be delivered at that price. Or, but in general, we see as it is always with hypes, we see now the realism coming into where more and more companies have realistic ambitions on offtake agreements. We saw this year a 724 megaton ammonia offtake agreements. So this is, of course, this is equivalent to 20 megatons of green ammonia. So green ammonia means ammonia produced by green hydrogen. And we see the steel industry a bit uncertain because the premium on steel is quite high if you do it green. But we need these offtake agreements, and we see more and more of those coming in now as well. And also some price reduction. Then more electrolyzer projects are getting online, and that reduces the price in the end again. And coming back to the offshore hydrogen piece of it, that will ultimately help also the offshore hydrogen bit, because to make offshore hydrogen happen, we need cost reductions in the electrolyzer technology. We need to have more compact installations, which require less space. There are many requirements there as well.
Yeah, and I think maybe if it is crystal ball time to also maybe throw my my hat into the ring as well. I think as mentioned in the beginning, especially for these types of technologies where it comes to both the green hydrogen production as well as the offtake, there's two innovations that need to happen, and both of those need to be financed. So
Both need to be kind of in sync.
exactly, yeah, they need to be somewhat in sync, unless you really put a lot of subsidies onto it. We just really say, as a government, we really want to finance this. But I think this is in the end also what is needed. I think and this is my opinion, in the hydrogen projects that we now actually see reaching financial close in the Netherlands, for example, as well. Those big electrolyzer plants, they are enabled by subsidies, and I think these subsidies are needed right now in order to bring down the electrolyzer cost and to really see how can that go down. At the same time, also, we need to figure out which are the sectors where hydrogen can be best used. And I personally also think those in the first step will probably not be the ones where hydrogen or hydrogen products like synthetic fuels replace existing fuels, because the cost difference is just really high. So you first have to find a way to find the right kind of like, maybe products to support, to the right hydrogen strings to support, to enable that cost reduction, to grow both the production and the demand.
Yeah.
And then I suppose the question on whether hydrogen offshore really is a good solution to bring down costs of infrastructure, to increase the profitability of projects, is then one or two steps of innovation away, in the way that this really will need to be enabled by some innovations happening beforehand, by some developments happening over the next 5 to 10 years, maybe, or maybe even slightly longer as well.
Definitely. And I mean, that's what we're looking out for, quantifying really with DMEC what could be the value of it, understanding should governments actually do it or not, like the offshore hydrogen bit on that piece, and then helping companies along the way, like with our Oasis project, where we actually are running accelerator programs for this kind of innovators, which are in the system integration world. Like hydrogen is part of the system integration, so that when the innovation steps getting improved, that we are ready with the right kind of companies, the right kind of shareholders, stakeholders, to basically make it happen.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very nice summary. In order to make something as innovative as green hydrogen or even offshore green hydrogen happen. A lot of innovation is needed. A lot of new technologies are needed. We are doing our best to support the companies that are actually, doing this kind of pioneering work and trying out those business cases, really engaging and trying to make those technologies feasible. So we are very happy to support these companies and to also learn from them and help them at the same time to make it through that pathway as quickly, as efficiently as possible.
Exactly.
Well, thanks a lot, Benjamin. I think it was a very insightful conversation, hopefully interesting for you, the viewers as well. If you are interested in offshore hydrogen, in offshore renewable energy sources, in offshore sustainability, nature plus solutions that can actually help offshore projects to become more sustainable, maybe even do good for the environment directly, then please follow this channel, have a look at our other videos, have a look at our website, and see you next time. Thank you.